We're here to explore diverse career paths through personal experiences and real-life examples.
And also to offer profound insights to inspire your professional journey.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Work Without Borders. I'm Flora.
Hi, everyone. I'm Calvin. So today we are very honored to invite one of my really good friends, Jeff, to our podcast. So Jeff has this career that we are all very jealous of. And what he do is something I would say very unconventional. I personally always make fun of his lifestyle and say that his life is either a Friday or Saturday life. So meaning that he's either staying at a beautiful resort or he's going to somewhere fascinating, right? Uh,
Fancy.
yeah, so welcome, Jeff.
Thank you.
Welcome,
Happy to be
Jeff.
here. Thank you for your time.
Yes. So Jeff is actually a private jet captain on the Gulfstream 650, if you're aware of the aircraft types or if you're a plane geek. And he oversees the short to medium term function and planning of three other aircraft as well. So through his goal was to join a Canadian airline, he was offered to flying a position based in the Middle East and affording a beautiful career in the niche aviation he was actually unaware existed. So Jeff,
I'm so excited.
would you also give us or the audience a bit of introduction of yourself as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So born and raised in Abbotsford, British Columbia, about an hour east of Vancouver. Uh, Abbotsford isn't really on the map for much, I think, across the country, but it does have one major theme in the summertime. It's the Abbotsford International Air Show. So I think a lot of Canadians, even Americans, are aware that it puts Abbotsford on the map. So I suppose in that regard, there was a bit of a inception of aviation in my life from a small boy. A beautiful part of the world, as you know. Grew up there for 21 years, went to university, to flight school in Abbotsford as well, a very good flight school that was there. Finished my 4-year degree. They offer programs now where you can do aviation with a degree on the side. So in case the aviation aspect doesn't work out or you lose your medical along the way, you have a backup. So I elected to do my bachelor in business at the same time as well. So graduated from that, moved up to Whitehorse in the Yukon, north of Canada. Flew for about a year on a King Air 200, a King Air 300, flying across the north, doing medical evacuation flights. So patients would be injured in small towns, not even towns, hamlets, they're called.
Right.
So we'd fly in with a team of nurses and doctors, pick up these people once they're stabilized and fly them into a southern community where they could go to a hospital and receive proper treatment. So very interesting experience in the Canadian North, beautiful parts. We enjoyed spending time up there. And eventually, about a year after doing that, I got a call from a friend of mine who was flying private jets in the Middle East and said, "Hey, we're looking for a pilot. Are you interested?" And not knowing anything about private aviation, I think Canadians are quite frugal people. We expect value from what we're receiving. We don't want to spend more than we have to. So private aviation in Canada is very, very small. I didn't know anything about it, but looking at his pictures on Facebook and speaking with him, it just sounded like this incredible job. So I was fortunate enough to be selected for the position, and that was many years ago, about 18 years ago now. So I've been flying for this family for 18 years. So that's kind of the long and short of it, so to speak.
Wow. I mean, I personally don't know nothing about this whole industry, let alone the private jet. Yeah, that's everything you talk is just fancy and mysterious to me. So
It
you
was a
said that,
learning curve for me too. Yeah, it's a great point that not many people know about this. It's just elitist isn't the right word, but it's just very uncommon. So when you find people that are involved in this industry, yeah, you like to talk to their ear off, let's say, and find out as much as you can about it.
Yeah.
so can you share a pivotal moment in your career? Like, did you want to get into like Air Canada, like a more bigger company?
Absolutely. Canada, the options are pretty limited for an
Yes.
aviation career. Private, as I mentioned, Canadians are frugal. So for the most part, especially in the time that I was, trained to be a pilot in the early 2000s, I think things have changed a little bit then. You find more aircraft flying privately. But at the time, airlines was really the only choice. So from being a small boy, you want to be a pilot. Air Canada is the only goal really of any Canadian. So when the friend started talking to me about private aviation, it just looked unreal. You're flying dignitaries and leaders. In my case, flying for a family to all regions around the world. You'd be silly not to capitalize on something like this. Just even if it's not a long-term thing, it comes with its own unique challenges. If it's a short experience for you, it would still very much be worth it to see what it's about.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So like you absolutely had no idea what you signed up for back then.
There was a big leap of faith. And to be honest, I think the only reason that it was comfortable for me to say yes to this, because I had a very good friend of mine who was already there and had been there for years.
Okay.
So yeah, I trusted his opinion, and the fact that you actually knew somebody who was already there made all the difference, rather than just, applying for a random position and moving all the way to the Middle East to accept it. Big difference there.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a plane geek myself, right? But what specific training do you have to do, private jets itself? Is it like different from commercial airplane pilots?
No, it's pretty much the same process. And a general guideline, if I walk you through it, is the first license you'll do is what they call a private pilot's license. It's about 50 hours of training. And all that license allows you to do is to be able to fly but not be paid for it. So you can't, fly an airline, or people can't pay you to operate the plane. You can take your friends up flying for a weekend. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The next step would be a commercial license, where it's more training, air law and a whole bunch of other categories of study that ultimately allows you then to be paid to fly. So you could go to a company, say, hire me as a pilot, and you can collect a salary for your service, basically. A couple other smaller things you're going to need after the commercial license: a multi-engine rating. So if you fly an aircraft with more than one engine, there's a specific training for that. It's a little bit different principles of flying that you have to be aware of. And finally, an instrument rating. So you're flying without visual reference to the ground. You're flying in the clouds, so to speak. So once you have those, you're going to be looking at about, these days, the cost of training is getting quite expensive. I think you'd be anywhere from $80,000 to $120,000, depending on which program you select.
Wow.
And you could get that done in as quick as a year and a half, 2 years, or if you want to also supplement with a degree, you could do that over 4 years. After that, you get a bit of flying experience with your commercial license. The last step in the license is an air transport pilot's license, which you get after accumulating a certain amount of flight time, 1,500 hours. You write 2 different exams just to make sure, you understand what you're doing. And then that's kind of the last level of license. At that point, you do what they call type ratings. So for example, when you see a 747 flying or a 737, that is a type rating to fly that specific aircraft. So there's not a general license to fly these big planes. Above a certain weight category, you learn to fly that specific model, so to speak. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So you were trained to fly, let's say 737, and you have to get a different license for Gulfstream afterwards?
Well, you could do them independently. That you don't need one to do the other. So once you have that base license, I just go to a training provider that can do the Gulfstream 650 in my case, and in which case you do the month-long course, and then you get that on your license. So it's similar to commercial, but it has its own nuances, let's say. But generally speaking, is quite similar.
Okay, but I didn't know the tuition is actually this expensive, right?
It is very expensive.
Do you have to do this out of your own pocket, or is it like a contract that? Because I know, because my brother, so he's a captain in one of the Chinese airlines, right? So from what I know is that um, you need to sign like a certain contract with them. For example, you need to serve this company for 99 years, and then you undergo the training afterwards, and then so the company will pay for all the costs
Everything.
associated with it. But afterwards, you have to fly for this specific company for the rest of your life.
Right, that's a great question. And that depends on region, basically. So you'll find in the Middle East, some Asian countries, they have programs that are called ab initio, which I guess is Latin for from the start. So what they do is they'll go to university and accept applications for people that want to be pilots with no training and no experience, put them through a series of tests that, test their character and knowledge and, how well they can learn. And if they're selected, at that point, the airline trains you from no training to being a captain on whatever airplane they need. And at the end of that, you're bonded. So in the case of your brother, yeah, he would be bonded to whichever airline for a certain amount of years.
Right,
It's
right.
very expensive, and they really don't spare any expense to train their pilots well, right? There's a lot at stake. Alternatively, in countries like Canada, we don't have or are just starting to kind of get these programs now, where instead of, in my case, when I went to school, I paid for that. That was out of my pocket. Now, with shortage of pilots around the world, the industry is a fantastic time to be a pilot, and they're realizing it's prohibitively expensive. The cost of fuel kind of being the main driver in that. They're realizing that the average person isn't going to want to pay $100,000 and then join an airline. Your first few years, you don't get paid that well, so you're maybe say about $70,000 for your first couple of years. When you're $120,000 in debt, it just doesn't make sense after a while. And we're kind of at that precipice where Canada and other countries are now kind of following suit in that. So the industry is changing a little bit in that regard, which is good. I think that's going to serve the industry well.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, I have to say, Calvin and I may ask some question very, very shallow because we literally know nothing about this industry. But since you mentioned about economy, let's talk about that. So what's the salary range in terms of like commercial pilot versus private jet pilots? And then especially now you mentioned it's like everywhere is insured of pilots.
That's a great question. I don't have airline experience, but I have a lot of friends. Actually, basically all my friends fly for the airlines. I'm the only corporate private pilot that I know.
You're the richest.
The outlier and the richest.
So I would say that the corporate scale, first of all, depends on the size of the airplane you fly. The bigger the airplane you fly, the more money you get. Because, you're flying in different parts of the world. There's, different airspaces and structures you need to know. Yeah, so it's more responsibility, more knowledge, so you typically get paid more. In corporate aviation, private aviation, you get paid more sooner in your career because we don't have things like a pension, the backside that airlines do, where you start your career making a small salary, depending on your seniority and which airplane you fly. You start making more gradually over your career. And at the end, you have a pension and these other things you can rely on. So it's a little bit different in that structure. In terms of a dollar figure, I would say in the airlines, you might start as low as, say, $70,000 a year. But your final years of being, captain, depending on the amount of time in the company too, right? There's a lot of variables here. These days, I mean, there's pilots in the States making north of 500,000 and 600,000 US a year. On the private side of things, I would say roughly the same, maybe a little lower on the high end, like 360 to 400,000 a year would be kind of the highest side, because you're getting that earlier in your career, if that makes sense. And it depends on your employer. Some of them are more generous than others. Private aviation is very subjective as well. So if you have an owner that's a bit of a cheapskate, you might be out of luck. But the family I fly for, I think they like seeing familiar faces, that are flying their planes. So they're happy to pay and give conditions to the job that are conducive to keeping people, which I think is smart. Training is very expensive, so
Oh
you want
yeah.
to keep people with longevity, and a little bit more salary goes a long way, in my opinion. Yeah.
Also the privacy and the security. If you know this person for over 10 years, it's more trustworthy than to hire someone cheaper from nowhere. Nobody
Exactly.
knows you.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. I've been here 18 years, for example, and you feel like a bit of an old shoe, which is, a nice feeling. You're just so familiar with them. They're kind and generous. You appreciate their sense of humor and the humility they have. It's very nice. I'm very, very fortunate.
Wow. So 18 years, hey? I mean, I can barely think of staying in one company for 18 years. I mean, there must be something that, makes you stay. So tell us what it is.
Well,
Exactly.
so a caveat to the 18 years, I do work month on, month off. So you could kind of divide that by two in a sense. And the reason for the month on, month off is, you're at work for your month on and you're on call. The schedule changes quite a bit. It could be, different members of the family want to fly somewhere short notice. So they want the airplane staff 24 hours a day, 365 days a year to absorb these types of changes.
Wow.
So you can't be on duty forever in that regard. So we work a structure of two pilots on duty, and then the other two pilots are at home. And that's how the month on, month off works. So yeah, 18 years has gone very quickly. A few more gray hairs as the years go by here, but yeah, it's gone quick. It's been a very beautiful career. I think anyone in aviation would attest to that. It's a wonderful profession to be involved in.
So so your employer has more than just you as a pilot. They must have more. How many pilots do they have? Do they
Yeah,
hire?
so we operate three aircraft, two long range, one short range, and there's four pilots per airplane.
Wow.
The bigger ones have flight attendants. So our fleet at the moment, yeah, three airplanes. We're at 12 pilots and five flight attendants
Wow.
that serve the family. And
Serve
it
one
sounds,
family,
One
right?
family.
yeah, it sounds opulent, but when you see kind of the day-to-day running of it, I mean, between the business and the pleasure, it it works as it should. It's not as ridiculous as it might sound from the outside because they're a very busy family.
Okay.
I
They must be. They
I
must be.
literally can't imagine. Like I was gonna ask, like even though you have these much of resources, do you need to travel that much? But maybe you just answered my question.
Yeah, you've got things like scheduled maintenance you have to contend with. So say roughly 6 weeks out of every year, each airplane is down. So you
Oh.
lose a little bit of that. So you want a little bit of redundancy. So yeah, there's justifications, believe it or not. It might sound a bit wild from the outside, but when you're involved on the planning and running of the company from the inside internally, you see that with all the moving parts, three is actually a pretty nice number to have with the amount of family members that he has.
Wow. Okay. Okay. I mean, I would actually be laughed to death if I had one, but let alone three.
No,
Okay.
I'm still, yeah,
We're living in a
I
different parallel world.
no, I think this is literally out of our imagination by this point.
Absolutely.
I really
Absolutely.
can't just, I mean, yeah, business, I kind of get it because there are so many like a million miles customers and for business traveling so much, but like to travel that much for leisure purpose, I it's out of my
Maybe it's
imagination.
for business purpose too, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
Or a mix of both.
it's a lot of business. It really is. And to justify a lot of the components of private aviation, I mean, time savings is massive, right? Like literally, when the owner gives us a time, say he wants to take off tomorrow at 10 a.m., he shows up at 9:30, the plane is fully ready. He sits down in his seat. By the time we're closing the main cabin door, the engines are starting and we're taxiing out, within 5 minutes of him having sat in his seat.
Wow.
So, and the backside, when you land, he goes right to his car and he's driven immediately off the airport. His luggage is in the back already. You're saving, 4 or 5 hours on every flight. So there are justifications at this level.
I
Time
believe so.
is everything.
I'm
Yeah.
sure it's worth it because maybe you're at that level. 1 minute of your time is worth like millions of dollars, right? So you want to
Yeah.
make sure, yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's even tied into aircraft manufacturers these days. The airplanes are flying faster and faster. Nobody wants to waste that time in the air because, maybe you're conducting a business meeting as you're flying, but other than that, flying is basically dead time, right? You're not at your destination, and you're not in a meeting on the ground or with your family or leisure time that you're enjoying. So, that saving minutes is in every column of this industry.
Right. So from what I have known Jeff, right, out of this past, I don't know how many years, to me, he's either staying in a resort in somewhere in the Middle East, or he's just flying to travel to Mykonos or like Italy. So, like, now it's, your time to just give it to a fair justification, Jeff. So tell us all about like what is your schedule, or like what is your day like as a private jet pilot?
Yeah, keep in mind there's a bit of a social media effect, right? I think maybe you're I'm choosing selectively which pictures to upload that maybe you're making this justification from. We fly to a lot of nice destinations. We're very fortunate all over the globe. These airplanes have a long reach. So North America, South America, Europe, Africa, Asia, literally everywhere but Antarctica. Some countries you're happier to be in than others. The infrastructure could be a bit of a struggle in some locations. Security is a concern. You could be in North Korea, you could be in Venezuela, you could anywhere in between. And if a lot of these men that have private jets or companies that have private jets, they're making their money by being in emerging economies, right? So you're often in countries as well. To be fair, Calvin, to balance out the pictures that you're seeing, you're counting the days that you're there, wishing you were somewhere else, if that's fair. But yeah, in terms of the day to day, Calvin, to answer your question, the way our company is structured, that we typically get notice. I'd say about 5 to 7 days ahead when there's a flight. It goes to a dispatching company who sends us all the timings, the takeoff time, the flight time, the arrival time, and some other critical trip information. We're making some preparations leading up to the trip, arranging our own crew pickup, hotels, that kind of light keeping. And then when it comes time for the trip, it's actually quite easy. Our dispatch is done for us, so our flight plan is given to us. We know the route, we know, the fuel we have to take. And often once we're in the air, the planning is the hardest part, right? So once you're in the air, the work is behind you, and it's often wondering where we're heading for dinner that night.
Wow, so this is what you worry about, right? Most of the days.
So when you're on duty that month, you basically just stand by.
Correct. Yeah, we have the phone 24/7 with us. Yeah.
Whenever they want to leave to wherever, you just stand by.
Exactly. And that's pretty rare that we get those short notice calls. The odd time, hey, how quickly could you get to the airplane? 2 hours, 2.5 hours, we could be airborne. So depends on the owner. Some people fly by the seat of their pants. The people we work for are very planned, punctual, no surprises. So we're just very lucky. I think to a high degree, your satisfaction and longevity flying in this career is dependent on your principal, on the person that you fly for. There's some nightmare stories out there, I have to be honest.
Bring it up.
Oh, I mean, as I say, just a lot of last minute stuff and surprises. As I said, thankfully, the family we fly for don't operate like that, and that's the reason I've been here for 18 years. They are not your average person by any stretch.
What's the shortest notice you have ever gotten?
It'd be like, I'm at the plane in 20 minutes, get here as soon as you can, and we'll just go. So yeah, he's there, or one of the family members is there before you get to the plane. But look, they understand you can't make the impossible happen. I think based on movies and all this about people that fly in private jets, they can be, insanely demanding. Surely there's a bit of demands, and it should be. You're operating at a very high
Yes.
level, so you expect things to work as they should. But it's not like in the movies. They understand there's physical limitations to how quickly someone can get to the airplane.
Wow.
I mean, can you share a story? What's your biggest crisis ever?
Like in terms of, say, an emergency or something on the
Or
airplane,
yeah,
or
just in your career, because I mean, flying a flight is already very risky, right? And then I just want to know
Stressful. Yeah.
stressful, and what's the biggest crisis or most dramatic moment
yeah, I'd
you
say
can
there'd be
think of?
a few, some a little more latent, some a little more requiring immediate attention.
Right.
Uh, I'm going to date myself here, but the Arab Spring, I want to say it was at 2012. We were in the Middle East at the time.
Mhm,
And I mean, that erupted quite quickly, right? And we
mhm.
were in the Middle East at the time. So, you're watching the news, being in a region of the world where this is literally happening
Mm.
Right
down your
now.
street, and you don't know where this is going to go. There's a whole revolution and the government's being tossed out. And you're just sat in your hotel room or your apartment thinking, oh boy, like, should I just get on the next commercial flight out of here and head home and call it a day?
Mm.
So, you have a lot of concerns about your safety and sometimes the longevity of the job. Another example would be COVID, right? When COVID kicked off, the travel industry took a serious beating. Never mind, you're concerned about your health. You're in remote parts of the world, perhaps worried if you get sick. Is this
Right.
virus the killer that it's made out to be in the news? I remember that being a stress. Thankfully, that seems to have sorted itself out. And maybe a third example, something a little more acute. You have in-flight emergencies every now and then. Probably the biggest one in my career has been similar to Sully Sullenberger, the A320 that went in the Hudson River there.
Well,
We had a bird go through one of the engines just after we took off as the plane was leaving the ground.
Oh my God.
Thankfully, only the one engine, and it wasn't serious enough that the engine didn't blow apart. Just simply had to bring it back down to idle power to stop the vibration. But you do an emergency landing and you make all the precautions. And there was a VVIP guest with us on that trip, along with members of the family. So it was a very inopportune time in an African country as well, that infrastructure was a difficulty, but everything worked out nicely in the end. So yeah, you really get a range of socioeconomic and political troubles to immediate in-flight troubles, so to speak. So it's very interesting in that regard. So yeah, I guess comparing the private jet industry from one region of the world to the other, if you look at Canada, where I mentioned, we're quite frugal people and expect bang for buck, let's say, compared to the Middle East. If you go to the Middle East, it's all about service, right? They want, China, the food has to be served on China, where Canada, you'd charter a flight and you'd have like styrofoam cups and paper plates and catering from fast food companies like KFC or McDonald's, right? I think
No.
Donald Trump is infamous for that. For when he flies, is always fast food, it seems like, right? Yeah, the Middle East is like, fine dining. It really is about the service and the experience. And I think money is just how they view spending money in the Middle East is different than what it is in Canada. I think the industry affords a little bit of, with the cost of fuel, for example, it's a lot cheaper in the Middle East. So perhaps where they save there, they're willing to spend on something else. But yeah, the service, I mean, if you've traveled to Dubai, a similar country, I mean, you just know you check into a hotel and the service is next level. So if that's the service you're getting at a hotel front desk, you can imagine when you step onto an $80 million private jet that you're paying $15,000, $20,000 an hour to fly on. You're expecting the best.
Wow. So I was gonna actually ask, what is the reference of the operational cost? So you just mentioned it's around like $20,000 an hour. Like, How about the plane, just maintenance, or like, like if you have like maybe like a bulk or range of number that you can share with
Yeah.
Yeah, like
us?
how much money do they spend every year on these
Yeah.
whole thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's some general metrics for
Hmm.
aviation. I understand it's kind of the same in the yachting world as well. So depending on the price that you spend for a plane, if it's a smaller plane, obviously it's cheaper. The bigger the plane, the further it flies, the more expensive it is. If we use the case of, say, a Gulfstream G650, if you
Hmm.
buy that new, I think now you're roughly around 65 to $70 million US.
Hmm.
And you can expect about 10% the cost or the value of the airplane to be your annual operating cost.
Mm.
As the
Wow.
airplane gets older, obviously there's more maintenance functions and things to fix and systems to check. It becomes more expensive over time.
Mm.
So I would say your first 5 to 7 years, yeah, you could expect 10% the
Okay.
value of the airplane to be your annual operating cost. If you charter, say you don't want to own the airplane outright,
Mm.
and you charter, say you go through FlexJet or
Yeah.
NetJets, which
Yeah.
a lot of people use. If you don't have pride in ownership, if you don't want to own your plane with its own paint job and you've customized the seats and the interior, these fractional companies are a fantastic way to fly if you don't care about that.
Hmm.
And yeah, the 650, I believe, charters out for about $15,000 to $20,000 per hour. So it's expensive. You do a 10-hour flight, you're in the neighborhood of $200,000. But
Hmm.
yeah, if you've got 10 friends, you could break that down to $20,000 per friend. I guess
Groupon
that's a little
charter
more
to
reasonable.
Group punch. Oh my God. Can you imagine?
that doesn't sound very
I
right.
don't I don't think you need to have a group home when you're at that level, Flora.
As we said before, I've been here for 18 years, and when you're
Mm.
looking at the cost of things, it's still I still have to work on wrapping my mind around these costs because I don't live like this in my day-to-day life, and you have to leave your home brain behind
Yeah.
and put in that brain to think how they would think. Like, for example, when we put our plane into maintenance, and if something should be repaired or fixed, sometimes you'll ask the owner, like, look, this is an expensive fix, we can push this off to the next maintenance if you don't want to do it now. But there comes a price threshold where it's like, if it's $10,000, it's not worth asking the boss if he wants this fixed. You just know to say yes.
Mm.
And it ends up being a lot of money. So you really have to leave your home brain behind, because I wouldn't spend $10,000 to fix some of this stuff where, yeah, he absolutely would.
Mm.
Well, yeah, I was gonna ask, like you mentioned, if they want fine dining on their private jet, they must hire
Catering
chef,
yeah,
catering
chef.
as
Yeah.
well, right?
Yeah, believe it or not, so there's actually private aviation caterers.
Mm.
So I know some of the owners, they have their chefs at their home, and they'll just have the chef where they're leaving from, hey, put us together a lunch and we'll just take it in the car with us, give it to the flight attendant, we get aboard, and we'll have that. Depending on where you are and if your principal has chefs, that might not be an option. So in our case, that's mostly not an option, and we just go through these private catering companies. And you'd be surprised at the cost. Like, if you go to a nice restaurant, it's expensive enough.
Hmm.
And I think it's definitely next level expense when you involve a private jet. I think people just start seeing dollar signs. So,
Yeah.
you really have to watch the invoices and make sure that, you're not being ripped off, so to speak, and
Wow.
avoid places that really charge beyond what they should.
Yeah.
Yeah, the family I fly for, they're creatures of habit, so to speak. So, when you've been flying them for
Mm.
so many years, what they like. Okay, it's going to be,
True.
our flight attendants take care of this, but you hear this time and time again. So steak and potatoes. The other passenger likes fish and something else. So yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because that's definitely a thing that they tweak the flavors of the cuisine to make
Yeah.
it more pop, let's say, at
Yeah.
altitude.
Hmm.
That's
Yeah.
why they say like airplane food is usually not very healthy, but I'm pretty sure what Jeff eats or his passenger eats is, very
Yeah.
different from what we have experienced. So
That's what
I
WestJet's telling you, maybe, just to yeah, keep your hopes where they should be, down low.
so like what is your in-flight meal looks like? Is it like just, pure caviar or, like
Oh, no, I wish. No, unfortunately, the expense of that limits that to passengers only. That we basically just eat the leftovers. That the flight attendant will order for a couple options for each passenger, and whatever isn't served, she'll come to the front and say, "Hey, I've got this left over," and
what?
put together. The odd time, it might be like a crew meal if it's a short flight and the
Mm,
passenger
Ah,
doesn't want catering. Yeah, I love
well,
Whole
that makes
Foods.
sense though.
Yeah, yeah. So we might pop into a grocery store before we go flying if it's
mm.
just a what we call a ferry flight, a flight with no passengers, and we'll just take care of that. So we're lucky to see some very beautiful food. Leftovers isn't exactly a nice word for it, because
I don't think
it's
it's leftovers. You're
beautiful, but
you're
It's just
misleading us.
options, other options.
Other options, yes.
I don't like wasting food. As Calvin
No,
knows, I have a very big appetite, so I enjoy my food, and yeah, we're very fortunate in that regard, to eat the leftovers, quote unquote.
Leftover quotation, yeah. Because I'm pretty sure if you're flying, passenger that is like, um, billionaires, right? Like they like to have their options. They want to have 100 options, and then they only have this big of stomach, so they can only have two out of this 100 options. So Jeff and his crew can have the 90, the rest of 98. So that's so-called leftovers, right?
I think there might be a bit of a misnomer. I feel that uh, through movies and social media, they show these wealthy people as like demanding, and they want all these options. I think you'd be surprised with how simple
Really?
most of them travel. It's kind of like an old money versus new money type thing, where you could just
oh,
see old money and new money a mile away, because new money's flashy and demanding, and in your face, and old wealth, um, it's quiet, and it's understanding, and it's simple. And I personally am so fortunate to have experienced with passengers like this, that old money.
So
love
it's
it.
so it's
Yeah,
quite different from what we have seen, right, Flora? Like if you Instagram, like you will see, there's some
Yeah,
celebrities out there, right, flying in their
yeah.
Hermes, like this and that. Like, no, none of this.
that's definitely out there. But yeah, not in the case that
Mm,
I fly it for, which I love. They don't like waste. They're simple, friendly, good sense of humor, just very kind people. And these got kids, and they're all working hard. They go to school. Just amazing people, and nothing but respect for them, and the parents, how they've raised their kids. Really a tip of the hat.
wow,
Yeah, not spoiled. I think that's the takeaway. Just not spoiled at all.
that's great.
I mean, if my traveling is taken care of by private jet, I will be very, very nice and unstressed too, because
Humble.
I don't have to line up, check in, and everything. I think I'll be very calm as well. Um,
I think it's one of those things you get used to over time as well. Like
yeah,
you
your
say you buy a
body
new
just
car,
yeah, your body just responding to that.
yeah, and then 6 months later, you forget that you're driving this new car.
We read that some people, in order to like flash out, they share a room decorated as a private jet to
Oh
take
yeah, yeah, yeah,
pictures.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's ridiculous.
Studio, yeah,
That's
studio to take.
that's
The good thing
ridiculous.
about being a pilot, and you spend a lot of time in airplanes and different types of airplanes, is you can see very clearly. It's all in the details. So if someone sat by a window and there's a detail that doesn't look right, you just know that
It's
no, that's
fake.
actually not a real airplane. Yeah. And look, it takes real money to operate these types of things, and you could tell if I don't know, if you're familiar with who they are and they're sitting in this big jet. Well, look, that's $20,000 an hour to operate. Like, uh, that takes billions of dollars. You have to be worth that to be able
Mm,
to run these types of machines. So,
Yeah, it's
it,
it's almost have to be your disposable income to do that. You can't
that's
just
right.
like that's all of your money, right? That's just
right.
part of your money. You're
That's right.
maintaining your real estate as well. You're maintaining your yacht as well. Like it's just part of your disposable income.
Yeah, it's impressive how much you have to generate to fund this, for sure.
That's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So like what's the most luxurious or extravagant request you've ever received from your passenger?
Oh, yeah, you guys would probably be bored by this answer. As I say, the family flight for is just so reasonable.
Old money or boring?
Oh,
The
money
old money,
boring.
yeah. And but look, I hear crazy stories, and I can just
Yes, please.
pass along stories that I've heard. But uh, there was a case, a former colleague of mine flying for a family in the Middle East, and I think he'd like these specific watermelons. And they
Okay.
had flown to, I believe at the time it was maybe somewhere in South Africa, but they'd forgot these watermelons. So he had the plane fly back to pick up
No.
these watermelons
No.
and fly them.
Literally, carbon footprint is not in their mind.
Yeah, this was like pre-carbon footprint discussion. Nonetheless, still doesn't invalidate, I suppose, that the waste that is. The other story that comes to mind when you ask that question, another former colleague of mine, I guess his owner, they had a dog that they'd like to spend time with during the week, but they would fly it to the trainer on the weekends. So they would hop on this plane and fly to be with the trainer over the weekend.
Oh my God.
God. I mean, I've never
This dog has a problem.
so
It's not a
jealous
training
of
skill.
I'm jealous of this dog's life.
Yeah, he's living a good life. There's no question about that. But
Oh my
look, I
God.
think with wealth comes responsibility as well, and that's perhaps crossing the line.
Yeah.
You can put that money to good use in other places.
Wow. So I feel like, because you like, I don't know, I mean, like to me, sounds like the work part of your life is just something that is very out of our own reach, right? Like it just feels like, like you're living the bubble. But when you're like 1 month on, 1 month off, like afterward, does it take a long time for you to readjust it, to the normal
Switch.
people's life? There's like a
Oh,
switch.
totally. Yeah. To bring in kind of what that looks like, if you're looking at my Instagram and everything looks amazing in these locations, you have to remember you're
I need
away
to follow
from
that.
you're away from home a month at a time, right? That's a
Mm.
long time. If you're in a relationship, or for my colleagues that have kids,
Oh.
that's heartbreaking to be away from home that long. However, you're able to justify it. If you worked a 9 to 5 job, well, you see your kids in the morning for maybe an hour, you see them for a few hours at night. I guess they've done the math and said, hey, look, I actually spend more quality time with my kids
Exactly.
working month on, month off than I do. So there's a bit of up and down with that. You're fighting jet lag a lot. It could be 10 hours of jet lag. When I live in Vancouver as my home for my month off, but when I go to work, if I'm anywhere between, say, London and Dubai as a range, you're 8 to 10 hours of jet lag to start. And then when you start flying, maybe the next day you're in that mix again. Maybe you've flown to New York. And so there's a part that you don't see it that I suppose takes a toll on you as any job does. But you have to take the good with the bad, right? At the end of the day, what I do is well into the plus category. So it's tough, for example, to book vacations as well, like with friends. I think Calvin knows this, if there's something coming up and, hey, Jeff, can you are you free in June for 2 weeks? We're going to do a cruise or something like that. I'm like, oh, that's, if it's February, that's even way too long for me to
Yeah.
confidently say, yes, I can be there, can't be
Yeah.
there. And really my holiday is being at home after I've been, in hotels for 30 days. Probably one of Marriott's best clients.
Yeah, he was talking about that.
I love being an ambassador elite guest, but my holiday is coming home, walking through the doors of my apartment, seeing my partner, going into the kitchen. I can eat a bowl of cereal when I want, or make coffee, and just these small things that are perhaps an annoyance to people that live at home are luxuries to me because I'm away from home so much. So it's an opposite lifestyle in a lot of sense.
Fascinating.
6 months away from home, plus you want to go on holiday? Like, no, I want to stay at home. Home is my holiday.
Yeah, I think like that must be very tough on your personal life because I mean from a friend's perspective, like as you mentioned, I usually never ask Jeff to do anything beyond 1 month mark because I know that the answer I'll get is like, I don't know, maybe, right?
Mhm.
So
It's
so
like,
like
what are
I
you doing
always
now? I'm heading to the gym. Like,
yes, yeah. So like I always
So,
want to
so, so,
check. Mm,
I'm sorry. So it's, you don't know. I thought it's like first of every month.
no, 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 no,
No.
no.
no, it could be all over. So, for example, I leave for
Oh,
work on February 17th, which is a Sunday, and then I'll be gone for 31 days. So, month on, month off is just
you
yeah,
just
I
don't
guess,
know.
yeah.
Oh,
I think
And
1 month on 1 month off is like more of a generalization cadence, right? I mean, sometimes you'll be gone for 2 months, right? Like you never know.
yeah, 2 months would be extreme. There'd have to be a sickness or a colleague who's injured.
oh,
We operate as a skeleton crew. So, two pilots are flying the plane and
yeah,
then two
yeah, yeah.
pilots are at home. So if one of the pilots flying gets sick or say breaks his leg, well, guess what? The guys that are at home, one of you is going to have to come in and supplement.
I
It
see.
happens rarely, but when it does happen, it always seems to be like when you've had something really good planned. So you you get
Murphy's
used to
Law.
flying by the seat of your pants. Yeah, Murphy's Law,
Yeah.
exactly
Oh my
right.
God.
It you have to
Oh,
dedicate yourself to the job first and foremost. I hate to say this, it sounds brutal, but your relationships come second in this career, and that's painful to say, and probably painful for some friends to hear, but it's what the job demands of you. And you have to be willing to give that. And this job is not for everybody. I'll throw that out there immediately. I'm sure if we had an airline pilot that had been flying in airlines for 10 years and came and flew with us for a couple of rotations, I'm
mm,
sure they'd be like, this is crazy. Like,
yeah.
I'd rather be away for home for 3 days and home for a week and away for 4 days and home for three.
Mm,
You, you're probably away from home just as much, but you're just at home more frequently, if that makes sense. You're not gone 1 month stretch at a time.
yeah,
Mm,
the feeling is completely different.
Yeah.
yeah.
But it's cool. You come home after a month away and there's a bit of a honeymoon effect, right? You haven't seen your partner for a while. So you're going on like dates and you know what I mean? Like, as opposed to if you're seeing them all the time, it gets, I don't want to say mundane because that's not the true feeling, but it's spicy when you're away month on, month off.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's fascinating, like how you look at your life through different perspectives, and then it's yeah. I mean, one of the beauties you can actually switch off. When you're off, so that you can spend quality time with people around you when you're off.
Mm,
Mostly, yeah.
Unless, yeah,
I'm also the operations manager for the company. So I
right.
deal with a host of other things like crew scheduling and regulatory compliance. So generally, I've got a few hours every day of emails that I can do and catch up with colleagues, which I like. I don't like leaving work and being disconnected from what's going on. I feel
Yeah.
I feel I'm good at that, and that's what I like to do.
mm,
So I accepted the position as that. But for my other colleagues that are quote unquote simply pilots,
mm.
they can completely disconnect when they're home, and that works for them, which is fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So I think, yeah, that's why every time you're here, right? I think one of the struggles is that sometimes, when we have like some friends gathering, I was like, oh, too bad that Jeff is not here. And then, like at the time that you're here, that, obviously we're very happy that you're here, but you just don't know that when is the next time if Jeff can actually make to our, party or if I can, yeah, like all of our hangouts.
So
So
live
yeah,
at the moment.
live
Yeah,
at the
I'm the
moment.
surprise guest.
Yes, that's
Live the
awesome.
moment.
Live the
Yeah.
moment. Yeah. Yeah. So Jeff, so like you've flown, I would probably say like almost for the rest of the world. Like, is there anywhere else that you have not actually been?
Oh, yeah, Antarctica would be nice.
Mm.
You can fly and actually land on an ice runway there. And there's
Wow.
some
Ooh.
owners that are very adventurous and like to do those types of things. Um, we like to try and leave hints in the airplane through like travel magazines. We'll like dog ear a page in a Condé Nast magazine or something, and hope that as the passengers flipping through that, they'll see this and the interest
Want
will
to
take.
go.
Yeah, but
That's
yeah,
very
as I
subtle.
say, they're creatures of habit. I think they
Mhm.
like what they like and they know where
Yeah.
they like to go.
Mm.
But yeah, Antarctica I think would be high on the list. I don't know if I'd want to pay my own money to go there, but I'd love to be part of the operation that took the family there, let's say.
Wow.
Yeah, keep sending the signals.
Yeah, exactly.
I think my final question is, because we've been talking about so much like freedom and adventures around the world, I want to switch to a different mind of myself, which is, what's your plan for your retirement? I want to know what's your plan, and then if that day comes, what's your plan doing after your retirement?
Yeah, great question. Thankfully, I don't have dependents, and dependents are not in my future plans. So obviously that frees up, a lot of capital and
Yes.
financial freedom, let's say. It certainly comes a lot earlier without kids. So
Right.
I like to think I'm pretty diligent with my savings. Perhaps I've adopted some principles of the family I fly for. I feel I'm not very bougie. Calvin can back me up on that. I have my things I like to splurge on, but
I have to say Jeff is very
Down to
frugal and
earth.
then very down to earth, and then he only spends money that he's like, like he thinks that's worth it. Like he's
That's very healthy.
totally upset from, what you would think of, oh, private jet, like this bougie crazy. No, like I've rarely seen him carrying or using any like designer stuff. Yeah, like I feel last time you talked to me, you feel so pressured by receiving this Berluti like handbag, right? You're like, oh my God, that's like a couple grand.
Yeah, I'm a pretty plain person, but I think I come by that naturally. So I'm able to save. I do my monthly investments that automatically get deposited in. So there's no pension, as I mentioned earlier. There's nothing to that effect. But I could see at some point, I love my job, but there will be a point where, the commercial travel, 24 hours when I leave Vancouver to arriving in the Middle East, those types of things will become a little less desirable, let's say.
Yeah.
And perhaps flying something more locally, like I look at Vancouver, we have Harbor Air, for example, that fly the seaplanes.
Oh, right.
And think, hey, they've got a great job. You're flying during the day. You're not flying a 12-hour all-night flight like we do once in a while. So you're flying during the day. It's short flights in a beautiful part of the world. So, I'm open to that kind of thing. But I like to think I've probably got at least, I'm 40 now, I would say at least 15, maybe 20 years in the job I'm at now before I start to explore semi-retirement projects, let's say. But you've got lots of options. You could be a sim instructor. They've got a great career path as well. There's other small airlines you could fly for that don't reach as far in terms of destinations. So the daily missions are a lot easier to take in that regard. But I like to think I'll have options. The way the industry is going, it's a great time to be a pilot. It looks like the trajectory is going to keep that way. So I think things will be on my side. We're just very fortunate as a generation of pilots to be here at this time, enjoying what the industry is putting forward to us.
That's awesome. That's awesome. We're very happy for you. Yeah. One last question is that, do you have any advice for aspiring pilots out there who's looking to become a commercial or private jets pilot?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say certainly in terms of being a pilot in Canada, I feel it can be a tough start, a rough start to getting into the career. It's getting easier because, as I said, the industry is just doing so well that compared to the time when I was graduating from flight school, you basically had to move to the Canadian North and fly, these small planes in undesirable locations. And you were planning to leave as soon as you could once the next job was offered, So if you don't have that desire and love of being a pilot, I would say it's going to be a tough career to get going in. So if you're unsure if you want to be a pilot or not, I would say an easy default would be to say no. Just it's a lot of capital and it's a tough start. If you love aviation and you've always wanted to be a pilot, you have to do it. It's such a rewarding career. And I would say the next big thing in that process is just networking with people. It's people that get you the job. in my case, I'm here flying for this family because of a classmate of mine. I showed up with a certain skill set, of course, but he's the one that got me with my foot in the door. And without that, I wouldn't have heard about this. So I would say networking is very important. And pilots are good at that naturally. I don't know, we're of the same mindset. We've found something that we love to do, and we share that passion with each other. So the networking, I find, is just comes very easily. Yeah.
Awesome.
And enjoy the ride. Pilots are very destination driven. I would say and encourage any pilot that's starting, just enjoy the process. I know that's tough. You're maybe in a spot in your career where, if only I had this job or was living here, or there's always a reason to be looking forward, but just to sit back, trust the process, work hard, enjoy the time you're spending with your colleagues, the other pilots or the flight attendants in the parts of the world that you're at, because it will happen. Good things are coming. Enjoy the ride.
Well, yeah,
that's great. Enjoy the ride.
Enjoy the ride. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think thanks, Jeff, for coming here with us, not just sharing fascinating sides of your life, right, or like your career through your private jet eye, but also I think you shared more of a genuine kind of a struggle or that challenge that you've been facing throughout this year, right? So yeah, we are truly appreciated that. Thank you so much.
It's a
Thank
pleasure.
you so much, Jeff.
Thank you. I hope I've done justice to the career.
Eye-opening conversation.
Very, very, yes. Fly high and live the moment. Okay.
I like it.
Enjoy the ride.
Sounds good. All right. Okay. Thank you, Jeff, again. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
It's a pleasure.
Bye for
Thanks,
now.
guys. Take care now.
Okay.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
Bye-bye. All right. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in today. You can continue finding us by searching Work Without Borders, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. And we will see you again next Wednesday.